and gentlemen, it's my honor to introduce President Mark Turner.
You did. You did well. Good evening, y'all. It is great to be in New York. Actually, it's great to be anywhere except Washington, D.C. Dean, thanks for that introduction. I'm going to have, I hate to do this to a state president, but I'm going to have to. I got to make a correction. You messed up. But it's my fault that you messed up because I didn't tell you I had another grandson born last week. So I now have 8. You know, it's always great to come up here to New York, and I particularly like speaking to you all at this dinner because you have this nice reception. Everybody gets in a good mood with the drinks and such. And then you have fun out here talking. So everybody's in a really good mood when I get up, and that gives me a greater opportunity to depress you with all the stuff I'm about ready to tell you. I did have a lot of sympathy for you guys. You know, coming from Texas and close to the coast, we experience hurricanes. And I've been through several in my life, some pretty serious. And I really felt sorry for you guys when those hurricanes and tropical storms came up here this year. I mean, it's an unusual event for y'all, but it is tough, and they do create a lot of damage. So I'm hoping everybody is recovering from that was affected. You know, Dean, I know you know he does a good job here in the state of New York with the New York Farm Bureau. He also serves on the AFBF Board of Directors and does an outstanding job representing not only New York and the Northeast region, but also American agriculture. In fact, he's doing such a good job that I sent him to Europe to deal with the Europeans. Word is, he did a great job, so I'm going to have to send you back again, Dean, and I do appreciate you going over there for those, actually 2 sets of meetings that I wasn't able to attend, and I think they did a good job, once again, explaining several facts. Number one, we don't need more rules, even though our European friends think we do, and that we are the good guys. But anyway, it's great to be up here because of the anniversary, the 100th anniversary. That's a big deal. 100 years from the beginning of an idea that became a movement. It's still going strong. And I said all of you weren't in the little presentation this afternoon, but I said it's only important in the context of if it inspires us and motivates us to move forward for the next 100 years. And I know we're going to do that. You know, that early start involved a lot of people that actually made some commitments and sacrifices and had a lot of debate about how to go forward. But they came together on behalf of agriculture, and I think that's been the key to Farm Bureau all along, is that we are willing to come together on behalf of agriculture as individual farmers and ranchers so we can speak with a greater voice as a united organization. We've come a long ways. Let me just give you a little sense of the membership progression over the years. In 1944, we passed the 500,000 mark. In 2000, we hit 5 million member families. And today we have more than 6 million member families. I seriously doubt that those who started this organization could have envisioned how far we've come. But I think they would have been proud of us for doing what we've done. A lot of things have changed in that 100 years. One thing that hasn't changed is grassroots advocacy and control. That's the cornerstone of this organization. It still exists today. It's very important. Now, that hasn't changed, but how we do it has. We've had to adopt modern technology. You know, people got the flip cam phones out now and taking pictures and putting them up on Facebook and all that to further advocacy efforts. I wish I was smart enough to do that. I haven't figured out how to do all that yet. But we do have an up-and-coming generation of young producers that certainly know how to do it. A couple more things have not changed about Farm Bureau over the past 100 years. We remain non-political. We remain non-partisan. I think that's probably better. We avoid radicalism. And if you know some of the history, and it was referenced a little bit in the play this afternoon, a lot of the farm groups that were hatched in the end of the 1800s and early beginning of the 1900s were really pretty radical. But we wanted to take a different approach as an organization than we have, and we've always avoided that. And we've been good at organizing our plans for growth and moving forward in the future. And I'm going to talk a little bit about that toward the end. You know, this time of year I get to do a lot of annual meetings. I get to do some county annual meetings earlier, and it's always nice to be able to get out in the countryside and do that. And I always ask, well, what should I talk about? And the answer is pretty much the same. We want you to give us an inspiring, uplifting, motivational message. And we want you to tell us what's happening in Washington, D.C. And I got lots of challenges, folks, but that is a major one. Well, let me start out with good news anyway. That's always a good place to start. The aggregate farm economy, the U.S. farm economy, is doing really well. Now, the first thing most farm leaders in any organization or Farm Bureau leaders understand is that you never tell a bunch of farmers that things are good. It's not in our genes to be able to accept that. The reality is, when you look at the numbers, U.S. agriculture is hitting a record $100 billion plus in net farm income. We have a positive trade balance, record of $42.5 million. We're exporting $137 billion worth of products. And farm income is up. So are expenses, by the way, and I think all of us know the path that expenses take when farm income goes up. We're up to over $320 billion in expenses. So we're a huge part of this U.S. economy. No matter how much people in the city may want to ignore that fact, or frankly some of our leaders in Washington, D.C., we are a huge part of the United States economy. And the United States economy ought to be thankful for the huge positive part we're playing, because the rest of the economy isn't doing so good. We've got a situation in this country where we have high unemployment. The GDP growth is kind of slow. And that's creating a lot of angst. And you hear and read about it in the political context every day. And it's going to take a while to turn that around. We've got a serious fiscal situation in this country. I don't have to tell you all that, having a country that is $15 trillion in debt is probably not a really good thing, but that's what we are. You should have a country that has $1 trillion plus annual budget deficits, and that's where we are. And we've had some grand plans to try to fix that, which I'll talk about in just a little bit, about the super committee. But Farm Bureau, as policy is clear. We want to see a meaningful reduction in our debt. We want to see a balanced budget. Oh, by the way, we don't want any new taxes. And oh, by the way, we want government to keep giving us everything we're asking for. We're a little schizophrenic ourselves, folks, and it's a reflection of, I think, the way people feel in this country. It's always, let's cut the other guy. We want to kind of keep getting what we've gotten before. But that's what's gotten us into this mess. My grandfather taught me everything I needed to know about economics, notwithstanding a couple of economics classes I had in college. Simple phrase. When your outgo exceeds your income, your upkeep will be your downfall. That's true for us as farmers. That's true for us as farmers as well as countries. And we are seeing the very serious impacts that are occurring in various parts of the world, right now the EU, where countries have not followed that. Well, I'll start in on some of the not so good news, and I think it's pretty clear. We want a deficit reduction, but any deficit reduction is going to involve cuts to those funds that have been coming to U.S. agriculture through the Farm Bill and through other entities, structures, but mainly through the Farm Bill. And we're not only talking about the commodity programs, which some people have loved to hate, and probably not quite as important in this part of the country as they are in other parts of the country, but it also includes conservation. It includes research and extension for our extension friends that are here, and rural development funds, just the whole list of things that are included in the Farm Bill. It's going to be subject to cuts, and we know that. We have said over and over again that, yes, we are willing to take cuts, but we don't want to take more than our fair share. I'm not sure us saying that's going to make a lot of difference when it comes down to the hard political decisions that have to be made. And getting back to hard political decisions, if you remember last August, we had a little fight up in Washington with the Congress about what to do about increasing the debt limit, the debt ceiling limit. And the markets sort of didn't like what we were doing, and they downgraded our debt. At least one rating agency did. And so that gave them a little incentive not to solve the problem, but to come up with a new structure, a new political structure, that given the fact they couldn't make a hard decision under one political structure, they created a whole new one, and I'll use the short term for it, the super committee, to try to solve the problem. Well, the super committees failed too, if you haven't been paying attention. And that has ramifications for us in agriculture, because there was an effort to try to write a farm bill in the hopes of maintaining as much budget funding as we could, taking some cuts, and running it through that process that wouldn't allow it to be torn apart on the floor with amendments, and I won't get into all the details, but basically it was a strategy, it was a tactic. It was a tactic basically that failed because the super committees failed. So now we're back to the traditional way of writing a farm bill, and that's going to go through hearings, and then we'll go through the normal process, and we don't really know how it's going to play out. It's just that we're going to go back to a more regular form of debating a farm bill. And the AFBF Board of Directors, as Dean well knows, and Carl well knows, has been working very hard to try to figure out how we should position ourselves organizationally. And I suspect we're going to get more guidance through our grassroots policy process, starting next week when we have our AFBF Resolutions Committee meeting, and then continuing that out in Hawaii with debating farm policy. For those of you that are going to Hawaii, I don't know how many people are really going to be interested in foreign policy when we're out in Hawaii, but at least we'll probably have a few. At least I'll be chairing a meeting with a few of them in there, I think. The good news is the solution we've come up with has some possibilities, particularly for the specialty crop sector that hasn't existed before. Now, we're a long ways from selling it, and I can put everybody to sleep in this room in about 10 minutes if I start going through the details of it, so we're not going to do that tonight. But just stay tuned and know that your organization, by listening to our grassroots policy positions that have been proposed by the delegates and whatever those decisions are in January, we're going to work very diligently to do what we can to minimize the impact on agriculture, but once again realizing we are going to be taking some serious cuts. So that was for bad news. Let me switch to good news again. Congress actually did something positive this year. Anybody know what? Yeah, they did go home. That was they didn't stay home, though. That was the rest of the problem. Yeah. The free trade agreements that had been hanging there for 4 years were finally passed. Now, once Congress makes up its mind it can do something, both parties can come together and do it. And they did. And we now have free trade agreements with Colombia, Panama, and South Korea. It's going to be important. It's going to be important for New York. Products like fruits, vegetables, and nuts, dairy, beef, processed food products, all are going to find a better home and more of a home in South Korea, and that's going to be positive. It's not an absolute, cure-all for anything, but is one more step in a long line of things we've done to improve the opportunities for U.S. agriculture. Now, Dean, I had to come up here, and I think you pointed out that you had to talk about labor and immigration and that in this meeting 3 full days. Let me give you my contribution for the night. It's a huge issue. And we're working on it. Yeah, but let me tell you, things have gotten more complicated, folks. When I was 8 years old, my father took me and made me a farm worker. Didn't really matter whether I wanted to or not, I was. And he taught me to do a lot of things. He taught me how to do a lot of things safely. I was never seriously injured on the farm. And I worked very, very, very hard, as many of you in this room have done under the same circumstances. Well, our government, in its regulatory wisdom, has now decided that, what parents do with their kids working on the farm just isn't quite good enough, and the government wants to tell us what to do. Now, there's a new rule on ag labor as it relates to people under 18 or children, as they're saying. And I'm going to caveat everything I'm going to say with this statement. No one wants a child to be hurt on the farm. No one. I had a cousin that died in a farm accident. No one wants a child hurt. They should only be doing activities that are age appropriate for them. However, having the government come up with a whole set of regulations that don't make sense, written by people who don't understand how we even operate as farm families in this country, doesn't make sense. Now, the regulations have been proposed. We've made serious comments about all the flaws in them. And I mean, it gets down to the point of a kid couldn't now operate a battery-powered screwdriver. The people who are doing this are saying, well, y'all are blowing this way out of proportion. It's not going to change a child working for their parents. That's probably technically true, But if you have a partnership or a corporation that's a family corporation, it's not the same game. You would come up with these rules. And frankly, my father and uncle were a partnership, and so back in the days I became a farm worker, I probably couldn't have been able to do it under the rules that potentially will exist. We hope that they're modified substantially. We will continue to fight to be sure that they make sense for us as farm families that want children to have the opportunity. And what better opportunity could kids have? And frankly, we hired a lot of high school kids over the years, and I taught many of them how to do farm work, drive tractors, take care of cattle, and do all that kind of stuff. Some of the best experiences they probably ever had in their life to train them and prepare them for their future life. So we want to be able to maintain that, but that's just another example of regulatory overkill. In fact, I say the greatest threat facing American agriculture is regulatory overkill. It's not the farm bill, it's not trade, it's not all these other things we work on so much. It's regulatory overkill, and I know you in New York experience enough of it yourselves. Speaking of one of those efforts, and this is to show you what AFBF is doing, Chesapeake Bay, it's got this little body of water down there, and I think some of the Susquehanna River kind of runs into it, from what I understand. EPA has decided that they already have proposed a set of rules that, in essence, if they are applied the way EPA would like them to apply, are going to do serious damage to the ability of agriculture to produce anything in the Chesapeake Bay watershed. So, we believe that EPA is exceeding their authority under the law. And we believe it so strongly, we're suing EPA and taking them to court. I tell people have told me, well, EPA really doesn't exceed their authority under the law. Well, folks, we've already taken them to court with confined animal feeding operations at the Fifth Circuit Court of Appeals and basically rule in our favor that they were exceeding the law. And so we've already shown they're exceeding the law once, and we're going to do it again with the Chesapeake Bay watershed. Now, you know, all right. And we have been trashed. I think I've even been trashed personally by the Chesapeake Bay Foundation and others associated with them about the fact that, well, farmers just want to be able to pollute. Well, they're a bunch of idiots. I can't, as a Texan, I can't really do what I'd like to do in most of these situations. You know, we have USDA has the data on what farmers and ranchers in the Chesapeake Bay watershed have done to improve water quality, put in conservation efforts. The data is all there. EPA just refuses to acknowledge it. So we are doing a good job, and if people would, you know, drive around and take a look, they can see for themselves. But you know, this is about fighting a philosophy, is what it is. It's almost like fighting a religion, and you can't fight religion. It's hard to inject facts into something that's faith-based, and that's what this environmental community, you know, has. So anyway, stay tuned. We're working on it. We do have some good news to tell nationally about how well we've done in terms of conservation. I'm not going to dump a bunch of numbers on you, but we work with the Keystone Initiative, and that's about the sustainability. Y'all have heard that word. No one can define it, but you've heard the word, I'm sure. We've been working to keep bad things from happening in defining it, but at the same time, some of the analysis has been done, and I'm going to use corn as an example because that's the one I have here. It's probably not the best example from up here, but you guys grow corn too. Corn production over a 20-year period from 1987 to 2007 has grown by 47%. Per bushel land use to grow that was reduced by 37%. Per bushel soil loss was reduced by nearly 70%. Water use dropped by an average of 27% per bushel. The National Resources Inventory, which is another proof, basically, that we're doing a good job, shows that our productivity has increased tremendously over the past 50 years. Total U.S. crop yield in tons per acre has increased more than 360% since 1950. But the use of all resources to produce that has dropped remarkably. Conservation tillage use is up. All that's resulted in a 50% decline in cropland erosion since 1982. We are doing fantastic things as an industry, and yet we're not getting credit for it. And part of the problem is most of our citizens in this country don't have a clue as to what we do on those days. But we have to be able to change that. We have to somehow make that connection with the citizens and consumers in this country if we're going to change, if we're going to move the needle on that perception. How many of you, and this is to wake up anybody who had too much dessert here, how many of you have heard said or have said yourself, we need to do a better job of telling our story? Anybody? All right. Question number 2. How many of you have ever said, agriculture just needs to get together? Oh, none of y'all believe that? Beautiful. Well, we're doing that. For the first time, I think in history, literally all of American agricultural production has come together for one effort, and that's the U.S. Farmers and Ranchers Alliance. It is an effort to create that dialogue, a very direct dialogue with consumers, directly with farmers and ranchers. There's been this whole social conversation in this country about food and how we produce it, how we raise and grow it. We haven't been part of the conversation. Let's see, there's new and fuzzy terms you're supposed to use here. I can't call them our enemies, I can't call them our critics, I'm supposed to call them those who disagree with us. Those who disagree with us have been telling consumers what they think, or what they should think, about how we produce food, how we raise, and you're not supposed to say produce either, how we raise and grow food. And that's been a mistake. We've let that happen. But a little over a year ago, the commodity groups came together, just about all the commodity groups in the country, the major ones, and have said that we need to do something different than what we've been doing, because what we've been doing hadn't been working. And so we're coming together with a major effort to create what we're calling the food dialogues. And that effort is going to be to have that engagement directly with consumers and have a conversation. You know, I'm Texan, so I like to tell people what I think they need to hear. Consumers don't really like that. They want you to have a conversation with them. They want you to answer their question. They want you to talk with them. And I've experienced that actually with people in Houston, back when my daughter was doing some sports in Houston with a bunch of other urban parents and suburban parents. They're willing to listen if we're willing to have that conversation with them. And I think that's what we're going to have to do if we're going to move forward and move that needle on consumers' perception of what we do. So stay tuned to that, U.S. Farmers and Ranchers Alliance and the Food Dialogues. You can go to fooddialogues.com if you want and kind of see what we're doing. We're into our second year now, and we're really ramping up some of the programs and the outreach that we're doing. And we're going to be looking for farmers and ranchers that are willing to take a little bit of training on messaging and what to say and how to engage with consumers to further that cause. Our goal is to find 250,000 farmers and ranchers across this country that are willing to do that. It's going to take us a while to get there. It's not going to happen overnight. But if any of you are interested in that, I'm sure you can contact Dean at New York Farm Bureau, and we can figure out a way to put you to work. All right, last topic. This is the 100th anniversary of the idea and what began here in Broome County for Farm Bureau. In 1919, AFBF was formed, so in 2019, that would be our 100th anniversary. It's always good to look back at the past to see where you've gone and where you've been, to try to figure out where you need to go for the future. The AFBF board in the October meeting approved a 2-year project. It's called the Centennial Development Project. And the timing is not entirely coincidental. We've been thinking about this for a while. But 2011, we're kicking it off. That's the 100th anniversary of Broome County Farm Bureau. It'll be a 2-year project to basically, it's like strategic planning on steroids. We're going to look at every aspect of Farm Bureau. We are going to try to answer the question, if we were creating Farm Bureau today, what would we do? What would it look like? How are we going to position for the future? Who are our members? Yeah, that's a good question. Who are our members? We're not even quite sure about that, Dean and Carl. I think y'all know we've had those discussions in the board. So we're going to answer all those questions, uncomfortable. Some may be uncomfortable. But at the end of that 2 years, we're going to develop the Centennial Roadmap, finish or propose the Centennial Roadmap if the board approves it. And then we'll spend from 2014 through 2019, 5-year period, implementing whatever changes that are directed through that process. And that gets us to the 100th anniversary of American Farm Bureau. We are going to seek input from across the entire structure of this organization. Young farmers and ranchers, Women's Committee, Promotion and Education, state administrators, all of our state presidents. We're going to have a way of accumulating all that, and the board of directors will be serving as a committee of the whole to take in all of that input and try to figure out that path for the next 100 years. So it's an opportunity for everyone to weigh in as to what you want your organization to be for the next 100 years. Because I'm pretty confident that if we do it right, we'll be around and be very effective at the end of those next 100 years. I won't be here, Dean won't be here, Carl won't be here, unless I come up with some new technologies that...
Technology?
I don't know, you're pretty young, Dean, you may be here, I don't know. Sorry, Carl. You and I got something later. But the reality is we need to chart the path for the future for this organization. And we want everybody that believes in this organization and has an interest in that future to be able to weigh in. So stay tuned. You'll be hearing a lot more about that. Thank you for all you do for Farm Bureau. I tell people, and Dean knows this as a state president, Carl knows this. Those of us who serve in these leadership positions, if it wasn't for the work that all you guys do, there wouldn't be any need to have us around. In fact, there wouldn't be much for us to do, to be perfectly honest. So I appreciate every day what our Farm Bureau members do in their states and in their counties to make this an effective organization. And make no mistake, we are very effective. We just want to be sure we stay that way and even more so for the next 100 years. Thank you all for having me. It's been a pleasure.